Looping statements are those statements which makes an action to repeat for a certain number of times. So let's talk about the two main looping statements in Python, and they are the for loops and the while loops. Let's take a look at the while loop first. The while loop is somewhat similar to an if condition. So this is the syntax of if condition. So if an expression evaluates true inside the if condition, then you can execute the certain statements. So the difference between the if and while loop is that the statements written inside an if condition executes only once if the expression evaluates true. Okay, but the statements written inside a while loop is going to execute until and unless the expression evaluates true, as long as the expression evaluates true. Okay, the syntax of while loop goes something like this. So you write while expression, and then you write statements to execute inside this while loop. So the statements written inside this while loop will execute as long as the expression evaluates to true. Let's implement a simple counter using the while loop. So to implement a simple counter, before that we'll import the time module so that we can wait and watch how the counter is performing, right? So if we execute the counter, it's going to count down very fast. So to see the actual counting, we'll use this time function to slow down the program for each count. So we'll import time, and then let's start with count equal to 5. We're going to count the numbers 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. So we're going to do this using the while loop. So when the number is or reaches 0, we have to stop the counter. So while the count is greater than 0, we have to keep counting, and once it is 0, it has to stop the execution or come out of the while loop. So while count is greater than 0, we'll simply print count, and then the most important step is to reduce the count, right? If we don't do this step, in the next iteration the count will remain 5, right? And then it becomes an infinite loop. So it's very important that you decrement the counter so that the number reduces, and once it reaches 0, it comes out of the while loop. So count equal to, sorry, it's minus equal to 1. So we'll decrement the count, and then we'll wait for at least half a second so that we can see how the counter is performing. And as I said, you have to be very careful while writing the while loops, as it is easy to make mistakes that will make the statements to execute infinitely. In this case, as I already told, if we miss to write the count decrement statement, then the code will enter infinite loop. Then we have to manually kill the kernel and restart. So let me execute this program and see how the counter performs. Okay, so this is how we can implement a simple counter using the while loop. Let's now move on to the for loop. The for loop can be used to loop through individual items of an iterable object. The loop terminates when all the items in the iterable object is exhausted, or in other words, the for loop stops when it has finished looping through all the individual items in an iterator. Let's see an example. Let me define an iterable, or in other words, let me define a list of numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4, and I'll write a for loop on this iterable object, or I'll write a for loop on this list. I'll let for I in lst1 I am going to simply print I. Okay, so you can also make use of this time function to wait until it navigates the next item. Okay, for I in lst1, so we're going to loop through all the items inside our list using the for loop. We can also loop through each characters in a string object, as string is also an iterable object. So if I have a string something like hello, and I can also write for loop on the string. So I'll write for I in str1, I'll print I and wait for half a second. Missed to write for I in str1. Okay, so you can write for loop on the strings as well. So this is the reason is that the string is also an iterable object. We can also write a for loop to iterate over indexes of an iterable object. Okay, so there's a built-in function called in Python called as range, which can be used to generate a list of numbers which can be used as indexes to loop through our iterable object. Okay, let's see an example of how to loop through an iterable or a list using its indexes, right? So I'll define A, B, C, D. Okay, so I want to loop through each of these items along with the indexes, but so as I already said, let's take a look at the range function first, and we can pass the number to this range function and it will generate a number. So if I say range of 5, it's going to generate the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So let me write for I in range of 5, so let us say print I. Okay, so I'm going to generate the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So instead of writing 5 here, let's write the length of our list. So because we need to generate the indexes which matches the index, the length of this list. So the index of A is 0, 1, 2 and 3. The maximum we have is 3, right? So the length is 4. So this ideally becomes range of 4. So we will get numbers 0, 1, 2 and 3. So now let's write. So if you execute, you get 0, 1, 2 and 3 because the total count is 4. Let's print the item and its corresponding index. So we have the list here, and for I in range length of lst1, we'll print the item along with the index. So we are able to navigate through each of the items with the help of the indexes. There is a built-in function called enumerate, which will help to iterate both the index and the item easily without using this range function. This range function looks somewhat complicated, so it makes, with the help of enumerate function, it makes it easy to iterate through both the index of the item along with the item itself, without using the range function. So let's see an example. Let me define the list again. So I'll write for I comma item in enumerate of lst1, I will print the item, and along with that I'll print the index as well. So as you can see, enumerate function has helped us to iterate through both the item along with its corresponding index. Also, we have another useful function called as zip. Let me show an example of what it does. Let's assume we have two lists. So we have list 1 equal to A, B, C and D, and we have another list 2 equal to 10, 20, 30 and 40. Okay, so we have two lists both of same length. So if you want to write a for loop such that at each iteration if you want an item from list 1 and one item from list 2, then you can make use of this zip function. So let me try to show that. So when you write for I comma j in zip of list 1 comma list 2, so at each iteration one item will be available at this I and the item from the list 2 will be available at this j. So I'll say print I comma and j. Okay, so at each iteration you'll get one item from list 1 and one item from list 2. Okay, let me add a timer function so that we can see how this for loop is performing. So at each iteration you get one item from list 1 and one item from list 2 when you make use of this zip or zip function. Now let's take a look at this break statement. The break statement can be used to terminate the loop whenever a specific condition is met. Let's see a simple example to understand this. Also, please note that the break statement can be used both in the for and while loops. Okay, let's define a list of fruits here. So I'll define fruits equal to, let's say we have apple, orange, strawberry, let's have grapes and strawberry and maybe lychee. Okay, so we have a list of fruits, and what I want to do is, let's assume we are looking for grapes inside this list. So if you want to find out, or if you're looking for any item in the list, you basically write a for loop on the list, right? So I'll say for fruit in fruits. So we'll loop through each item in our list and we'll say print found fruit. Also, let's use this time function, this sleep function, to wait for some time for each search. Okay, so if I execute this, you can see that at each iteration we are finding out all the fruits. I mean, at each iteration we are looking at one fruit at a time. Okay, so the point I want to make here is, if we are looking for grapes and once we find grapes in our list, then there is no point in searching further. There is no point in searching these two fruits because we already found what we want. So it makes sense to stop looking further so that we can save some time. So thus we make use of the break statement here. So let me make use of break statement and terminate the search inside or terminate the for loop once we found grapes. So I'll write a if condition if fruit equal to grapes. So when we found grapes, I'll simply write print. We'll stop the search, right? So I'll print a message stopping the search as we found grapes, and then I'll make use of the break statement to terminate the search or terminate the for loop. Now when I execute, we found apple, we found orange, we found grapes, and after finding grapes we'll stop the search as we found the grapes. So now I hope that you understand the significance of break statement. Now let's take a look at another useful statement called as continue. The continue statement, again, it can be used both in for and while loops. The continue statement will skip an iteration once a specific condition is met. Let's assume if we want to remove all the fruits from our list except grapes. So I want to remove all the fruits from our list and keep only grapes in the list. Okay, in this case we can make use of the continue statement to achieve this easily. So let me show an example here. I'll define the list again. And then I'll print initial list. So we'll print whatever the contents are there in our list initially, and then I'll write for loop in fruits.copy. So we want to iterate over the copy of list. We don't want to iterate on the same list and keep removing it. So if fruit is equal to grapes, so if fruit is equal to grapes, we don't have to remove it, right? So we will simply write continue. So what this does is it will skip this iteration, or if it is not equal to grapes, it's going to continue, and fruits dot will remove fruit. Okay, and then we'll print removed fruit from the list. So except grapes, we will remove all the fruits from our list. We'll also make use of this sleep function to make the program run slower. And then after doing everything, we'll print the final list. So you should have removed all the fruits from our list except grapes. So let me execute this. So initial list, we have all the items, all the fruits. So it will remove apple from the list, orange from the list, and then once it reaches grapes, since the fruit is equal to grapes, what continue does is it will skip performing all these statements, and then it will move on to the next fruit, which is strawberry, and it will remove strawberry, and then it will remove lychee from the list. Okay. So another interesting thing about the for and while loops in Python is that you can write an else statement with it. So let me show an example and explain how it can be used. So I'll write a list lst1 equal to A, B, C and D. So for I in LST1, I'll print I, else I'll say print successfully completed for loop. Okay, so the else statement gets executed. Okay, the else statement gets executed once looping through all the items is completed successfully. So once the looping is done, only then the else statements get executed. The reason I said successfully, because in case the for loop or the loop terminated abruptly, for example, if there is a break statement inside our list, inside our for loop, then the else statement will not be executed. So when I execute this particular code, it will loop through all the contents. So that is the reason it's going to go into the else statement as well. So now in case I have a break statement in our for loop. So when I say, when if I equal to C, then I will write break statement and terminate this for loop once it finds C. So in this case, else statement will not be executed because the for loop did not loop through all the items in our list. So if I execute this, it will print only A, B, and it will not print successfully completed for loop because it did not loop through all the items in our list. Okay, so that's about for and while loops in Python.